In this video, we'll talk about lesson plans and lesson prep. All of your lesson plans should be prepared according to the curriculum on the wiki. So if you go to the right-hand menu here, you can click on any particular program and then choose the day of class that you'll be teaching. There will be a screencast as well as objectives and then a lesson outline with all of the tools that you need to cover. This outline is really just a lesson outline, so you'll need to be creative and come up with different activities and questions to ask your students to help them learn, and we'll be going over how to do that in some of the later videos. As you're prepping your lesson, you're going to want to make sure that you meet these objectives and that the students learn exactly what's laid out in the objectives. So you'll want to meet these, but also come up with some great creative ways to teach them. Every time you teach a class, you'll need to take an hour to prepare your lesson plan for that class. Even if you've taught that particular class period before, you still need to take that hour to prepare. This is because the more you teach, the better of a teacher you will become. So the first time you teach a class isn't going to be as good as the second or the fifth or even the 10th time that you teach that class. Every time you prepare a lesson plan, you can add in new questions, new activities, or examples that you think might be helpful to your students' learning. You can also take out things that maybe you put in your lesson plan the first time you taught it that didn't go so well or that you want to change. Another reason you always need to take that hour to prepare is that SAGEs are constantly changing class curriculum. So you'll need to go and make sure you go to the wiki every time, go to the page for that class, and see if anything has changed in the curriculum. We have several different resources to help you plan out your lessons. So of course, first of all, we have all of the information on the wiki. We also have a few different templates to help you. So if you scroll down on the wiki and you go under Becoming a Trainer, we have the Lesson Plan Guide. And this will just teach you how to outline your lesson. So you have your objectives and then an outline including your hook, your intro, and then an outline of how to teach each different concept. At the top of this page, we also have the lesson plan template. So if you just click on that link, it will bring you here. And this is just a more specific template which asks you what you'll be doing for each different part of the lesson, any questions, activities, shortcuts, and paths, and then the time that you'll be needing for each section of the lesson. So you can use this template, download it, and fill it out directly, or you can just take inspiration from it as you create your own lesson plans. Another resource we have is the vast archive of lesson plans that trainers have already prepared in the past. So if you go to the classes board on Trello, right now we are starting a new semester, so we don't have any that are already done, but you can always search for any class. So if I search for Excel, you can see that we've taught Excel many, many times. And if I pull one of these up, I can click on the lesson plan for that day, and then I can go ahead and look at it and take inspiration from how this trainer has laid out their lesson plan and exactly what they've taught in that day of class. You can use anything you want to make your lesson plans. You can use Google Docs, Word, Evernote, any word processor, or you can even do it on paper.
Now that you know what a lesson plan is, I'm going to go ahead and just go over some of the steps of planning a lesson with you. The first step is to put the objectives down on your lesson plan. So every class has objectives, and those are listed on the wiki page for that class day. These objectives are made by the SAGE for each of those classes, and they tell you whether or not you've done your job as a teacher. If those objectives aren't met, then you've kind of missed the mark as a teacher, but if they are met, then you've been able to cover the content in the class, and the students are able to do the things that the SAGE expects them to be able to do after they've taken this class. So you always want to take those objectives, go ahead and copy and paste them onto your lesson plan so that they're front and center and on the top of your mind while you are preparing your lesson and while you're teaching your lesson. When you make your lesson plan, you want to have a detailed plan, but you don't want to have a script. You want enough to guide you so that you don't get lost. But you don't want so much that you are just reading off from it and just kind of talking like a robot and aren't able to engage the students or play to the particular needs of that particular class. So a good example of something like this is if you have certain menu paths that you have to go through to do a certain task and you feel like you might forget those, it's good to write those down in the lesson plan. That's a good level of detail. For example, if you're teaching table of contents in InDesign, there are a lot of different menus that you have to go through to make that work, and even if you've done it many times, it's easy to get tripped up. So it's good to have those written in the lesson plan so you know, okay, if I get tripped up, I can just go back, look at my lesson plan, and then I can just follow that through. Another good amount of detail to keep is things like keyboard shortcuts, because those can be easy to forget, or the names of tools, especially if it's a tool that sometimes is called something different. You want to make sure that you know the correct name of the tool, and so you can write that down in your lesson plan. Of course, you want to write down things like the content that you're going to talk about, the explanations and demonstrations that you're going to do, and the activities that you're going to have the students do. You also want to make sure that you are planning questions. Sometimes people don't want to take the time to plan out their questions, or they feel awkward planning questions ahead of time, but it's really important that you take the time to do this. We're going to have several videos about asking good questions later on in this training, but make sure that when you're doing your lesson plan, you are taking time to intersperse questions throughout the lesson plan. You don't want just one or two, you want them interspersed throughout. Another really important part of the lesson plan is the intro. And the intro includes several different things, including introducing yourself to the class and having the class introduce themselves to you. It's great to have a question, especially on the first day of class, but even on subsequent days of class. I like to have a question of the day to get to know students better. We're going to have a whole video talking about building rapport, but this is one of the best ways to do it, is by connecting with students. So you can ask things like, what's your favorite color? Where are you from? What are you majoring in? Or where do you work on campus? Or even what kind of snack would you be if you were a vending machine snack? These are all good examples of different questions you can ask to get to know the students better. The other part of your introduction is a hook. The hook should be something that shows what can be done in the program using the tools that you're going to learn that day. A great hook is one that you've created yourself, although the Sages do have example hooks that you can use if you haven't had a chance to create anything in that program yet. But if you've done one yourself, that's a better way for the students to get to know you a little better and see something that you personally have done in the program, and that helps to build rapport, like we'll talk about later. Another important detail in your lesson plan is pacing. This tells you how long to spend on specific topics or activities. So lots of people like to do this based on the time in their lesson that they should be at. For example, like at 11:45, I should be talking about masks. Or they like to do the amount of time they should spend on a particular subject. For example, like I want 5 minutes for this activity. But make sure that you are putting pacing in each part of your lesson plan so that you can stay on pace and make sure that you cover all of the content that you need to in order to reach your objectives. After you've made your lesson plan, go ahead and look back at the objectives, compare your lesson plan to them, and see if the things that you have planned are going to lead the students to fulfilling the objectives for that class. Lastly, you want to make sure you have a conclusion on your lesson plan. You want to review with the students what you've taught them that day and tell them what they're going to learn next time if there's another class in that series. You also want to encourage them to take other classes that might build on the class that they're taking, as well as things like following us on Instagram and telling them all about badges. So make sure that you have a good conclusion and that you leave a few minutes at the end of your lesson to have that conclusion actually happen. Sometimes we get rushed towards the end of our lesson and we don't actually go through with the conclusion. Now we know that all of this can be really confusing as a new teacher, so don't worry. There are lots of lesson plans that are on Trello from more experienced trainers who've already taught these lessons before. And you're free to go look at their lesson plans and to take ideas from them, take questions from them, take activities from them to help you in building your lesson plan.